Hi, welcome back. So what I want to do today is I want to talk about revising a novel. Back in October 2015, I took an old short story that I had written back in 2007 based on a prompt from Stephen King's own writing about the female stalker, and I thought, well, you know what, I'm going to give that a try. And when I was going through my 2015 ebook creation blitz, I decided to take this concept of the computer nerd and expand on it because I had wanted to always find out what happened after the character goes into the room to, find out what his ex-wife has in store for him. And it was kind of an intriguing concept to see what I could get out of that. So I ended up writing an entire novel based on that premise. And as you can see, there's when I released it, I didn't have a very wide response. I had literally 2 reviews, both of mixed quality, as you can see. And I just, whenever you get that first star as your 1 star, it really starts to take a credibility hit on you. It makes you feel kind of feel like all of your work throughout all of your writing career has paid off into nothing, because you begin to wonder, okay, well, what is it that I haven't learned that I needed to learn before I posted this? And as writers, we always want to go back and try to do the post-mortem on why we succeeded or why we failed, because we want to duplicate success and avoid failure. So if you look at my reviews here for, again, the 2 that I got, the first one, contrived and boring. Well, I didn't think it was boring. I didn't think it was contrived, and sometimes I wonder if maybe the reviewer just didn't get the point, especially when he talks about the Deus Ex Machina, which, again, I go through the story and I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. But then you go into the 5-star, and it even for a 5-star review, it doesn't really tell me why it's 5-star. Not really. So I had to basically take an entire season of my writing career to go back and try to find out what I could have done to make it better. And I do that for all my books. And that's why I've been going through a long period of rewriting all of my books, not just this one, but all of them, to see where I could have done better. And it's the same way with the book covers and the content and everything. So in that journey, as I've gone back and started my rewrite on this particular title, I started thinking, well, you know what? With all this stuff that I want to do to improve it, I could potentially make a series out of it. So a lot of my thinking is not just for the book, but how it relates into a bigger context. So what I wanted to talk about today is the concept of revising a work you've already put out into the world. And even if you haven't put a book out into the world yet, you still may want to practice your skills of revising using really any trick you can learn. So the first thing I would recommend is, if you're in that state where you've written something that you feel like you could have done better, go back and research how to edit, how to actually make a story better. Find out what you have that successful books don't, or vice versa. And continue to kind of work your skills into developing that idea. Now, this video is not about finding those skills. I'm sure I could do one later on a different time, or maybe there's other videos out there that shows you how to do that. What I actually want to do instead is the process I'm going through to make this particular book stronger. And if you read my blog, you'll see that every so often I will do an update on any kind of book I'm writing or anything of that nature. And rather than doing a blog on that, I want to actually show you my process. So one of the first considerations I wanted to do when I actually went through the revision process is to figure out how my new cover should be different than the last one. Obviously, when you've already published your book and you want to redo it, you want to make sure that readers know that what you're putting out there is new. So, I don't want to do the same exact cover that I had before, and I want to do something that's more genre appropriate. So I had to go through and take a look at what genre appropriate covers look like. And again, this is a domestic thriller, so I wanted to make sure I had something that kind of showed that. So using Affinity Photo, I went ahead and redid my entire look to use the same basic photograph, which is, if you're not sure, this is exactly my desk. What you're looking at is where I'm sitting right now. The keyboard is that you see in the picture is on top of my knee right now. That coffee that you see up there in the corner, that particular cup is over in the sink. But, well, actually, that coffee was taken 5 years ago, so I guess that coffee is long gone. But anyway, the same setup still exists. That coaster is just 2 feet, or not even, about 1.5 feet from where I'm sitting. That's my personal setup. Sometimes you want to just take what you have available to you in order to make sure your cover stays unique, because when you use stock photos, you do run the risk of having that photo reused in another book somewhere else. So if you do have the means in which to capture your own footage or your own composites, I would do that first. But if you don't have good photography skills, or if you don't have the exact scene you need, then and you don't have the budget to hire out a graphic designer, then the next step would be to go to stock. But what I did do is I changed my font to something a little more appropriate, because again, with thriller, you want to have the thriller font style, and there's a number of different types that would qualify it as thriller, but the old Courier versions, in this case, this is a font called Remington Flyless, I think, or Remington. Anyway, it's a free font. I either got off of Font Bundles or DaFont. I'm not sure which one, but it's Remington Steel, right? No, Remington Steel is the name of the show. You know what? I will get back to you before this video ends. But anyway, I wanted to dress it up a little bit to something a little more appropriate to the cover. What's appropriate for this particular design. But again, I wanted it to differentiate from the old one in the sense that when readers do find it on the store page, they'll know that this is new. And one way to do that, of course, would be to label it as book one of a series, or even just in the title, give it the Computer Nerd book one or something of that nature. But I figured, why not give it this rebooted edition label? So how I end up categorizing that in the store, I don't yet know, because I'm probably still a few months away from actually putting this online again. But the idea is at least to have a template to work with. So if you're in a state where you're trying to revise, it doesn't hurt to have the image in your head before you even start the process of revising. That way you've got something to work with in your mind when you go through and try to establish the tone of the story, or whatever the case may be. You'll already have that plan. And then if you're doing a paperback, of course, you want to factor in how long your story will be, because paperback determines the width of your spine. And you want to make sure that your image that you use in the front will be able to integrate with the spine and the back page. So I'm pretty sure for now my back cover will not change from the original version. And again, if you go back to my Amazon page, you can see what that is, because it shows the image on both sides. But I don't think I'm going to be changing that, but I might. I don't know yet. But the rewrite will probably be a good deal longer than the original, and that's the other determination between the old version and the new. Is the old version had about 80,000 words in it. This new one it's going to be significantly higher. And I know in the suspense genre, you really shouldn't go over 100,000. But then books like Gone Girl, I think, is up to 160,000, which I don't think I'm going to hit that. But I'm sure I'm going to be over 100,000. I'm probably going to be about 130 is my estimate, in the rewrite based on what I've got. So having said that, I want to show you now my rewrite draft and show you where I am with that, because I think it's helpful if you are a writer who's looking for efficient ways to revise your novel that you've already got. I want to just give you an idea on how you can integrate new scenes or use what you already have to better your story. So let me show you that. So what we're looking at now is my Scrivener file for the Computer Nerd version 2. And again, this is going to be the story that I republished sometime either in late 2020 or early 2021. And this will be the beginning of a series if I decide that that's going to be a good fit, which I'm 95% sure will happen. And the reason why that 5% isn't there yet is because I do have other stories I need to fix for my brand before I move forward on new stories, so I wouldn't know when the second one would come out. But I am pretty sure that I'm going to write that second book. So that said, if you've looked at my video for the writing workflow, you'll recognize this particular scene here. This is my corkboard for the Computer Nerd with all of the scenes. I just a little while ago finished fleshing out all the synopses for each scene. I've also included in the yellow tabs my inserts for the scenes I don't yet have that I'm sure I need. And then as I keep on going, you'll find that I've got labels and status reports for all of my cards, including the final scene here, which in the original book was called a post-credit scene, which if you've read the book, the ebook, whatever, you would actually have to go to the very end of the book to find this. This is past all of the back metadata, like other books that I've written and things like that. Kind of like the whole premise was to take kind of like the MCU ending or the Pirates of the Caribbean ending, or even Napoleon Dynamite. It's probably the best example of this, because Napoleon Dynamite, if you have not seen it, if you stay after the credits, there's literally 4 more minutes of movie that follows at the end of the credits. This kind of adopts that model where we get the rest of the story in that final scene. But for the rewrite, I don't want to take the chance that people are missing it, because I do think it's important to sort of tie all the pieces together. So I went ahead and decided that'll be part of the main story and not the second ending. That said, as you can see in my corkboard, I have all these labels referring to the state of each scene. And I think this is important because this is good for overview of organization. So if you have a book that you've written that you want to improve upon, and maybe you've already published it, maybe you're thinking about publishing it, but you're not yet sure you're ready, I think this is good practice to take every literal scene you have, meaning instead of doing chapter 1 and complete, go to where your pound sign is, or your stars if you're doing whatever you use to divide scenes. I would literally divide them up per document, and then label them scene 1, scene 2, etc., but then have the chapter prefix and suffix beside that, so that you can keep track of where this will ideally fit in the book. So that if the first 3 scenes should all be part of the first chapter, at least you'll know that this is all part of chapter 1. It'll also be a way for you to determine whether or not you've got a chapter that runs on for too long. For example, my chapter 17, which I believe actually is this everything before scene or chapter 18 is basically new story, that this does not exist. Like the original book begins with scene 39. So literally, if you go look at my Amazon book right now, you'll find this paragraph opening the book. So I am adding all of this in ahead of it. So this is going to be what the rewrite provides, and this is going to, I think, be a better context for what the story will bring to the overall, not just this story, but for the series in general. And I just think it'll make it more of a thriller and less of a psychological, domestic journey kind of thing. So because I'm still trying to figure out what I want for each of these chapters, you'll find that my chapter labels don't really matter much. If I go to 17:7, scene 35, I mean, will this be part of chapter 17? I don't want 10 scenes in one chapter. That's crazy. Especially when you have, let's look at my word count. I got 804 on this one, 793, 482, plus an insert scene, however long that'll end up being. We're looking at 1,600. No one's going to read a 10,000 word chapter. That's crazy. So clearly this will become multiple chapters over time. I have not yet figured out what those chapters will be or how I'll split it, but that's something I will figure out as I go. And I'm sure that when I use my synopsis here for each one, I will have a clear picture of what I want. So on that same note, I want to emphasize that when you're using Scrivener in particular, you will want to use your labels and status in order to keep track of where you are. And I highly recommend using the synopsis view here so that you can have a clear bird's eye view of what you're working on. Now, if you are in the planning stage of a novel, like you haven't written a word yet, then this is another thing you can do to guide yourself around. But I would actually highly consider using a different program like Plotter or Campfire Pro or one of those that shows you a timeline, which Scrivener does not offer, so that you can have a clearer picture of how scenes work visually together. Because I've already written this novel, I already know where all the scenes are, so I could make use of the corkboard a little easier, because I can still move things around by nature of what I know is in the scene. But when I'm conceptualizing a scene, I don't have anything written yet, so I don't know exactly how it's going to play into the overall narrative. And when you're writing, typically your story will change as you write. No matter how well you plot it out, things will show up that you didn't anticipate that will change your trajectory, and it happens every time, at least with me. So I do find that writing the draft before you import it into Scrivener is helpful. But once you have a draft developed, then once it goes into Scrivener, you can have a clear bird's eye view of what actually works and what doesn't. So that brings us back to the corkboard, where I've got all my labels, things like concept only, first draft, needs confirmation, and so on. this allows me an overview of what really needs my attention. So like if I have a first draft, most of these are actually, second, third, fourth drafts, whatever, but I'm putting it in first draft for this particular folder, showing that I'm basically done with it, but don't count it out yet, or don't count it finished. Go back and just verify. But when I have something like needs confirmation, then something like this, basically what I'm determining is that I like the scene, but I still need to make sure that it works in the context of the structure and narrative. Because sometimes what happens is we have a great idea for a scene, but it ultimately doesn't work. So if I open up the scene to needs confirmation, actually, let me go into the actual scene here. What I'm looking at is I'm looking at a scene that probably will work, but because it's not about the main character, it's one of the scenes that's happening kind of behind the scenes, sort of like when you think about the villain and how they have their you have a window into what's happening in the opposition. This would be one of those examples of that. So we get to find out what forces are going against our main hero as early as scene 2. And so my thought is, well, that's probably a good idea. But when I actually go through and look at the pacing, I have to determine whether or not I really need that there. So it may be that I don't want it, but so far I think I do. So I want to just confirm that I need that. And then for something like concept only, scene 8, this is where I've written a scene that I feel like I need, but I don't actually know. And so I'm basically writing out a scene to test it, to see if it's something I even want, to see if it's something I can even use. So whenever you get a good idea that you think will work, go ahead and write the scene, but then just kind of leave it there in the place or position where you think it'll go, but don't necessarily confirm yourself to it until you know it works. If you take Robert McKee's advice when it comes to telling a story, you don't want you to take your first idea or your second or your third. You want to take your 20th, because you want to be able to find the best version of what you're trying to accomplish. Randy Inger Mason in his Scene or Dynamite Scenes book kind of reemphasizes that. It's not about the scene you like, it's the scene that's best for the story. And I know I have a habit of wanting to just like my scene and move on, especially when I've got 100 ideas and I know I don't have the time to write them all. I want to try to get through as many as I can. That means I don't want to spend a lot of time on one story, but you kind of need to at least put the effort in and get your best version of each scene before you finalize it. So whenever I have that needs confirmation or concept only or anything of that nature, what I'm really telling myself is don't commit to the scene just yet. It's here, it's a placeholder. Do more with it. If you find that it works, go with it. If not, keep working on it or get rid of it. Maybe it's not something I need. So concept only is typically going to be for the scenes I may not need. So if you are using Scrivener to do this, again, you'll do your cards all via the corkboard. And if you're wondering, the corkboard is accessed by the folder. So each document will take me to the document itself, but the folder view will take me to the corkboard. So that's something to bear in mind. And then you can, of course, adjust the size of your canvas here. So if you're not sure how to use, I know people have trouble with Scrivener, and it's not an easy program to use, but once you learn how to use it, it's pretty effective. And so that's one thing you can keep that in mind. And there's courses out there on Udemy. Joseph Michael has he's pretty famous for putting together this course on how to learn Scrivener effectively. If you are in one of those people who needs to learn how to use it better, I would look into that. But the quick short version is that it's pretty straightforward to just write a synopsis in your note card here. This is where you write. Well, I'm not going to actually do that, but you'll see that if I click over here. Oh, hold on. I didn't save. Hold on. This is where I update my synopsis. Okay. And you'll see that it's already updated here. Okay. But I don't want that. So it's a good idea in your synopsis to give your scene overview, and then if you have any notes to yourself, like I have, like say in scene 11, the scene has a document note that I'll need reference to in the rewrite. That tells me that I have something here that's speaking to me directly as the writer. Hey, before you finalize the scene, make sure you do this. And so in this particular document, you can see what I'm suggesting. And if I go to the actual scene, I can go and view why I said that, what I say. So, so that's kind of the overview on that. And then if you are using Scrivener, make use of your folders. If you're looking to use Scrivener as an export device, then you probably want to do a different tack here. I don't use Scrivener to export to ebook. I do ebooks through Word and through other sources. If Calibre would be one, and then if I Affinity Publisher for paperbacks would be one I would use. But for Scrivener, I'm really just using it to lay out my story and to make sure that I have it. Like, I won't even revise it in Scrivener. I'll actually revise it in Word, which if I show you down here, I have my story points for the book here. Well, I've copied those story points over to the section down here in research. So if I go to computer journal, general notes, I have the exact same document here. And so that's one thing to do, is just pull all of your resources into the same place. It's really a lot easier. If you have multiple drafts, put them in a different folder. There's no reason why you can't have a revision 1 folder in order to follow along your progress. Once I actually make all the changes I'm going to do here, I'll do a revision 3 and update my status reports and just, again, make sure I like everything. The advantage of using Scrivener too is you can isolate scenes. So for example, I have scene 20, 26, I believe, and 28 are all related. I think, is that the ones I labeled? No, 20, 22, and 28. So because I think they're all kind of similar, I want to see which ones I actually need. And so I would actually put them all side by side. So, and I believe the way you do that is if you click on one, hold Shift, click, and then Shift again, and I have just these 3 cards, then I can go into the outliner and see how they all read together. And that way I can just read in one continuous flow to see, what my main theme is, and then if I need to combine them all, I can. So anyhow, I just want to point that out there. It is a useful tool if you're not sure how to use it effectively. Again, some writers will write the whole thing in Scrivener directly. If you're not that kind of person, don't worry about it. You don't have to be. I still think Scrivener is a good program to use just for organization. But again, I personally think there are better programs for just flat out plotting. Now, because this book is already written, I don't need to use those programs to plot this one out. But for my Fallen Footwear revision, which I have talked about a little bit in my writing workflow video a couple videos back, you'll see that I'm using Snowflake Pro and Plotter in conjunction with each other in order to come up with a better story than what I have currently. And because I'm essentially rewriting it from scratch, then I'll want to go through the planning stages from scratch, because I'm ultimately rewriting the story from a completely different everything. Like, it's not going to be the same story that it was. And it's unlikely to share, all but maybe a couple of my favorite scenes. So wherever you are in the writing process or the revision process, do what you can to make the most of your software. But don't be afraid to invest in new software if you find that the one you're using isn't great. Microsoft Word, as effective as it is in the document drafting, it's very hard to organize with it. And it's very hard to do anything other than pants your way through a story. And which, again, I've done that for years. I've written, if you've seen my superhero novels, Cannonball City, Superheroes Anonymous, and I haven't released Alpharetta or Hardcore Journeyman yet, but actually it's going to be Hardcore Countryman when that's retitled. And of course all the sequels beyond that. But those were pantsed, and I've done a lot of rewrites over the years to get them in better shape. I'm still going to end up redrafting most of them into smaller books, so I'm not done. But I will want to use this process in order to get them into a more stable format. And so once you learn your structure, once you learn the mistakes that you've made in your previous journey, go ahead and adapt your strategy to revise, and don't be afraid to go back and fix what's broken. I'm of the advocation that if you've got a good idea, run with it until you can't improve upon it. The only books you should delete or not write are the ones that are a bad idea from the beginning. And you can always get feedback from your friends, from your family, from readers. If you think an idea, if you're unsure of whether or not it'll work, but if you follow, what makes for a good story. If you look at the the market for the kinds of books that do well, and see what their plot lines are, what their synopses are. You can kind of get a sense of what their trends are. And I know one more point I want to make before I sign off is that you want to try to keep your ideas as simple as possible. That's one of the things I run in my own personal development in writing, is I run the risk of complicating storylines too much. And even with this particular one, there's a character named Simon Pox that I really like. This guy, he's kind of a jerk. Not really. He's kind of a pathetic. I wouldn't call him a jerk. I would say the main character is a jerk, but this dude, Simon Pox, he's kind of a dummy. He's a lovable dummy who gets himself into some hot water. I'm pretty sure he's going to be a series character and not so much, that important for this book. And, I run a risk of bringing him into the story. And I still don't know that he'll actually make the cut for this particular chapter of the series, only because I don't know yet if I have enough leverage for him to really be of any use to this story. So that's one of the things I'm going to be deciding as I go through and put all my ingredients together, is does he fit this particular narrative? I have a plan that I should be able to hold on to him, but because I don't yet know if it's going to be effective, he may not make this cut, which means I might want to recycle these scenes for a later book. So these are decisions I have to make. Whenever we go through and revise a concept for, to appeal to the structure of our genre, in this case a thriller, thrillers are typically longer and more complicated, you still don't want to overdo it. You don't want to confuse the reader. So I'm trying to make sure I don't oversaturate my story with too many points of view. And that's the thing where even now, as I look at my outline, I do run into that danger. Now, one thing I could probably do in my synopsis here is, list who the POV character is. I think in something like Plotter or Campfire Pro or one of those, I would actually want to do that because I want to see how often a particular viewpoint character takes the lead. But because I'm really not doing that very much, only, most of the viewpoint characters are in response to the main character's problem, which is appropriate. I don't worry as much about who takes the lead or when, as long as the pacing persists. And so that's ultimately my view, or what I'm trying to look for, is not so much how often somebody's in the lead, but just how well do they keep the story going. So anyway, do with that what you want. I'll probably have this revised because of COVID. I'm still currently out of work for at least another few weeks. We'll see what happens in September. So I'm still just putting a lot of energy into my revision. So I could probably have this revised fairly soon, but I have like 4 other books that I need to update before I call my rebranding process complete. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, I just want to give you all feedback on this if you are keeping track of what I'm doing, or if you have no idea who I am or why you should bother caring about what I'm saying. At least know that I think this is good advice for any of you who are writing a book who needs to revise, or if you are planning a book and you're not sure whether you're making good decisions. Again, you can use programs like Scrivener to sort your way through. So anyway, all right. Well, hope you're keeping safe. Hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you give it a like if you do. If you don't like it, sorry, I tried my best. But if you do like this kind of content, please let me know in the comments. Subscribe. Share the video. Do what you want. But I appreciate all feedback and I appreciate all support. So with that, take care. Thanks. Bye.